They said fear had a shape in the 15th century, and its name was Vlad. In the forests of Wallachia, beneath mountains that swallowed sunlight and valleys where travelers vanished without a trace, a prince forged his legend in methods that the world still whispers about. Vlad was not born cruel, he was shaped by cruelty. As a boy he was held hostage by the Ottomans, taught their language, their customs, and their tactics. He learned to bow before the men who would one day invade his homeland. He learned how power worked in the empire across the Danube, and he learned something else, something more important. He learned what frightened them. When he returned to Wallachia as a prince, he returned with a different lesson carved into his mind. Fear is a weapon sharper than any sword. Wallachia was small. The Ottomans were vast. If Vlad was to survive, he had to make his land a place even an empire hesitated to enter. And so began the reign that turned forests into warnings and nights into nightmares. The first Ottoman envoys arrived with confidence. They expected a frightened prince, desperate for peace. Instead, they found a man whose eyes held nothing soft or hesitant. Vlad demanded they remove their turbans before entering his court. They refused, saying it was forbidden by their faith. Vlad nodded calmly, as if he respected their refusal. Then he ordered that their turbans be nailed to their heads so they would never again need to remove them. They screamed. His court watched in silence. A message had been sent across the border long before the envoys' bodies cooled. The Ottomans underestimated him again when they prepared their first incursion. They marched with armor gleaming and banners fluttering, certain that Wallachia would fall like a dying leaf before a storm. But when they reached the forests near Targovist, the wind carried a smell that did not belong to nature. Smoke pitched something else, something that made horses balk and men grip their weapons tighter. When they stepped deeper into the trees, they understood. The forest had been turned into a vision of hell. Rows of tall wooden stakes stood planted in the soil like the ribs of some monstrous skeleton, and atop those stakes were bodies, Ottoman soldiers captured in raids, rebels, spies, men who had once laughed at the idea of fearing a Wallachan prince. Now they hung suspended in the wind, their faces twisted in expressions that made even hardened warriors tremble. None bled on the earth. Vlad had respected his own rule, but the sight was enough to break the courage of an army. They called it the Forest of the Impaled. Some chroniclers claimed there were 10,000 stakes, others swore the number was twice as high. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. It was not the number that shook the empire, it was the message. Every soldier who entered Wallachia would see not just death, but a fate designed to crush the spirit long before the body failed. Ottoman commanders ordered their men to advance, but their horses refused. Men muttered prayers. Some crossed themselves, some vomited, some ran. Word spread eastward, reaching the ears of Sultan Mehmed, conqueror of Constantinople, breaker of empires, a man whom even Europe feared to name in anything but whispers. Mehmed did not fear Vlad, not at first, but he recognized something dangerous in him. A man who does not fear death cannot be conquered easily. A man who makes death a spectacle cannot be predicted. Vlad fought like a wolf driven from its den. He struck at night, he poisoned wells, he burned earth, he sent plague victims into enemy camps, wrapped in blankets that carried sickness. He ambushed sleeping soldiers, he vanished into forests that seemed to bend to his will. And when he captured prisoners, he did not simply kill them, he made them symbols. The Ottomans kept detailed reports, some preserved even today. They wrote of prisoners tied to stakes facing the rising sun, forced to watch dawn arrive over a land that hated them. They wrote of men bound tightly with ropes that cut into their skin, left in clearing after clearing as warnings to any who dared follow. They wrote of nights where prisoners heard movement in the trees and realized too late that Vlad had been watching them from the shadows, studying their reactions, deciding who would be spared as messengers and who would be left behind as messages. One captured soldier wrote that Vlad would speak softly to his prisoners, almost kindly, asking about their families, their villages, their commanders. Then, when they relaxed, when they believed this prince might show mercy, he would reveal the places where those same families, villages, and commanders had already met their fates. He broke hope by offering it first. That was his genius. Not cruelty alone, precision. But perhaps the most feared method Vlad used was one the Ottomans spoke of with shaking voices. He forced prisoners to sit at long tables, not as guests, but as witnesses. He would eat calmly while punishments were carried out in front of them. He ate slowly, carefully, as if nothing around him was unusual. And when prisoners broke down, sobbing or trembling or begging for mercy, Vlad would lean forward and ask them a single question. Do you understand now why you must never return? One Ottoman commander captured during a border raid was kept alive for days. Vlad wanted him to carry a message back to the Sultan. The commander was given food, water, and shelter. But every day he was forced to walk through long lines of prisoners awaiting judgment. He saw their eyes, heard their pleas. The commander later wrote that he feared not for his body, but for his mind. To him, the worst torture Vlad inflicted was not physical. It was the slow erosion of sanity, the way he forced a man to realize that escape did not guarantee freedom, only memory. When Mehdi finally launched his massive invasion, his armies marched with anger and prayer. They wanted revenge. They wanted to crush Vlad and erase the shame his methods had cast upon the empire. But as they advanced through Wallachia, they found villages emptied, wells poisoned, fields burned, and roads thick with stakes. Thousands of stakes, some old, some fresh, some still swaying slightly from recent weight. The closer they came to Targovist, the stronger the smell became. Smoke, pitch, and something else. Then they saw it, an entire valley filled with stakes that stretched beyond the horizon. Prisoners hung in neat rows like crops planted in a field. Ottoman officers felt their courage drain. Soldiers crossed themselves. Even hardened janissaries murmured prayers beneath their breath. Mehmed himself rode closer, his expression carved from stone. But witnesses said his horse shied away, refusing to go further. It was not the deaths that broke the army, it was the order, the precision, the certainty that every stake had been placed with intention, every body a warning, every angle calculated. Vlad had turned death into an instrument of psychological warfare. He had shown the empire that he did not fight battles. He orchestrated nightmares. Mehmed pressed on, but doubts spread through his ranks like cracks in frozen river ice. Soldiers hesitated in combat. Officers argued about strategy. Scouts refused to go into forests alone. And all the while Vlad watched from the shadows, the prince who had once been a hostage now holding the fate of an empire hostage through terror. What he did to prisoners was not only punishment, it was prophecy, a vision of what awaited anyone who believed Wallachia was weak. The stakes were not random, they were not chaotic, they were deliberate, and that deliberation is what shocked the Ottomans more than anything else. Because Vlad did not need to kill everyone, he needed only to make death unforgettable. They said that once an Ottoman soldier crossed into Wallachia, he walked through two worlds. One was the world of living men and marching armies. The other was the world that Vlad built in the shadows, a world where every whisper felt like a warning and every tree held a secret. After the great invasion stalled at Targovist, something broke inside the Ottoman ranks. They had come expecting a barbarian prince. Instead, they found a man who understood fear better than any conqueror they had ever faced. Even when they pushed forward, even when they burned villages and seized grain, they did so with the uneasy feeling that they were trespassing inside his kingdom of terror, a place where the forests themselves seemed to watch. Vlad allowed them to advance. That was the first shock. Most princes fled before the Sultan armies. Most abandoned their capitals and hid behind the walls of stronger neighbors. But Vlad let the Ottomans walk deeper and deeper into his land, as if welcoming them into a trap that had already been set years before they crossed the Danube. Every night the Ottoman camps shook with unease. Horses snorted at shadows. Men woke sweating, certain they had heard footsteps outside their tents, though no one was there. It was not imagination. Vlad was truly there. He sent small units through the forests, silent riders who could disappear into the dark like smoke. They did not fight large battles. They stole sleep. They stole comfort. They stole the sense of safety that an army needed more than armor or food. Some nights the Ottomans found strange offerings at the edges of their camps. Wooden carvings of wolves with human eyes, arrows planted upright in the soil, pieces of broken jewelry from soldiers who had vanished days before, a torn boot, a patch of cloth, a helmet, not blood. Never blood. Vlad maintained his rule, but he understood that what a soldier imagines is always worse than what he sees. The Ottomans began to fear sleep more than battle. They whispered that Vlad walked like a demon, never resting, feeding only on vengeance. Some claimed he turned into a wolf under the moon. Others said the forest spirits had bent their loyalty toward him. Superstition spread faster than orders. It weakened the army more effectively than any weapon. One Ottoman chronicle described a night when the wind itself seemed to carry his voice. The soldiers lay awake, clutching their blades, listening to something that felt half human and half storm. No one could interpret the sound. Some thought it laughter, others thought it was weeping. But when dawn came, torches revealed wooden stakes planted along the riverbank where no stakes had been the night before. They were empty, but they were there, and that was enough. The Ottomans eventually began to fall into Vlad rhythm without realizing it. They marched faster, desperate to reach him. They made mistakes. They argued. They split their forces. And the moment the army fractured, Vlad struck. The night attack of Targovist became legend long before the survivors returned home to tell the tale. On a moonless night, while the Sultan's personal banner fluttered above his camp, Vlad descended upon the sleeping army with the speed and precision of a predator. He had studied their layout for days. He knew where the officers slept, where the horses were tied, where the sentries grew careless in the dark. The Ottomans awoke to screams and torches and confusion. Vlad rode through the chaos with a small force, cutting down anyone who stood in his path. He did not expect to kill the Sultan. He wanted something else. He wanted the Ottomans to feel hunted. He wanted them to believe that no amount of tents or guards or fire could protect them from a man who had once been their hostage and now moved through their ranks like vengeance given flesh. He withdrew as quickly as he had attacked, leaving behind more fear than wounds. The next morning, the Ottomans found another forest of stakes, freshly placed, arranged in patterns no one could decipher. Some soldiers insisted the stakes formed ancient symbols. Others said they outlined the shape of a wolf's jaws. The truth is lost, but the panic it caused is still recorded. Mehmed himself realized that this land could not be conquered in the ordinary sense. You could seize the cities, but you could not seize the fear that belonged to Vlad alone. Still, the Ottomans advanced. They captured Targovist. They burned what little remained. But Vlad was gone, and the silence he left behind was worse than resistance. Some Ottoman scouts found abandoned houses with tables still set, as if the families had fled only moments before. Others found wells filled with stones, doors swinging in the wind, a single wooden doll placed on a doorstep staring toward the road. When they entered the forests again, the trees seemed closer, as if leaning inward, listening. Prisoners who were captured during this stage reported that Vlad did something far more terrifying than killing them. He spared them. He brought some into abandoned churches where candles burnt down to their last inch. He questioned them gently, like an old friend. He asked about the names of their commanders, their villages, their families. He did not threaten, he simply spoke and listened. And when he was done, he would release them into the night with a single sentence that followed them through the trees like a curse. "Tell your Sultan that I am not finished." Those prisoners returned broken. Some refused to speak. Others spoke too much, rambling about eyes watching from the branches and the feeling of being judged by something older than men. It was psychological warfare crafted with patience. Vlad did not simply fight the Ottomans. He infected their minds. Even Mehmed began to sense something shifting. Reports reached him of soldiers refusing to advance past certain landmarks. Others claimed that the trees moved at night. A few swore they had seen Vlad standing at the edge of the forest, dressed in black, watching them with an expression that did not belong to the living. Mehmed ordered discipline. He punished deserters. But fear cannot be beaten out of a man. It grows where punishment cannot reach. In the final stage of the campaign, when the Ottomans tried to withdraw to regroup, Vlad revealed his last strategy. He had spent months studying their movements, predicting their paths. When they attempted to retreat across a narrow valley, they found walls of stakes rising on both sides of the pass, blocking their way back. The stakes bore no bodies, only carved faces with expressions twisted into silent screams. The Ottomans believed they were real. Some soldiers fainted, others tore at their armor, begging their officers to turn back. But turning back meant walking into more forests filled with the same carvings. Vlad had created a maze of terror, a labyrinth with no safe direction. Commanders tried to force their troops forward. Horses refused to move. Men cried out that the land itself wanted them dead. And somewhere within the trees, through the thick fog of fear, they heard a single sound, a slow, deliberate knocking. Some described it like wood being struck, others like bones tapping against stone. It echoed again and again, steady as a heartbeat. No one ever discovered the source, but its rhythm broke the final remnants of Ottoman resolve. The army withdrew from Wallachia not because it was defeated in battle, but because its spirit had been shattered. When the survivors returned to the empire, they carried with them stories that even the Sultan had no answer for. Stories of forests that watched, of stakes that multiplied, of a prince who did not rule with armies or riches, but with a terror so deep that even victory felt like defeat. They said that in Wallachia nothing died quickly. Not hope, not fear, not memory, and least of all the legend of Vlad, the man who fought an empire with shadows, silence, and the certainty that terror, when wielded with precision, can be worse than death. They said the Ottomans left Wallachia, but the truth was the land would not release them. Even as they marched away, the men felt as if unseen hands pulled at their cloaks, as if the soil itself marked their steps and memorized their fear. The further they walked, the more they realized they were not fleeing from a man, but from an idea that had already begun to rot through the roots of their courage. For even after they reached the safety of their own forts, they dreamed of him, and those dreams felt more real than the daylight that followed. Then came the prisoners. The Ottomans believed they had finally captured enough captives to regain some sense of control. Dozens of Wallachians taken from raids, scouts caught in the woods, old men found tending sheep. They believed that capturing Vlad men would weaken him. They believed that prisoners could be traded, used as leverage, broken for information. But Vlad understood something they did not. Fear flows both ways. A prisoner can be made into a weapon if he returns home carrying terror in his voice. The Ottomans did not know they held the wrong men. Some were not soldiers at all. They were volunteers. They allowed themselves to be taken. They walked into Ottoman hands with quiet eyes and silent tongues, because Vlad had given them simple instructions. Say nothing, watch everything. Wait until they break you, and when they break you, smile. The Ottomans tried interrogation. They demanded information. They tried threats. Nothing worked. The prisoners whispered prayers that made no sense in Ottoman ears. They repeated phrases that sounded like invocations, curses, or riddles. Some simply stared at the walls for hours, as if listening to voices only they could hear. A few told the Ottomans that they were already dead, that Vlad had marked them long before capture. The Ottomans believed they had captured flesh, but they had captured shells. The men's souls were still wandering the forests of Wallachia, still whispering to the trees. When the prisoners were returned during failed exchanges, they carried something with them. Madness, yes, but not the fragile kind. This madness was a seed planted by Vlad, and wherever the Ottomans brought it, it took root. Soon Ottoman forts became infected. At night, soldiers swore they saw the Wallachian prisoners standing beside their beds even after they had been sent away. The torches flickered without wind. Horses refused to enter certain stables. Some soldiers carved symbols into their shields to ward off whatever had followed them home. But none of it helped, because Vlad weaponized silence. He weaponized memory, and he understood that the greatest torture is not physical pain, it is being forced to question what is real. When a group of Ottoman captives escaped from Vlad camps, they brought with them stories that no commander could ignore. They claimed Vlad did not shout at prisoners. He did not threaten. He simply sat in front of them and watched, sometimes for hours, sometimes for an entire night. When they cried, he waited. When they raged, he waited. When they begged, he waited. And eventually every man fell silent under that gaze. One captive said that Vlad's eyes did not blink. Another claimed they did, but only when he wanted the man to feel relief. So the relief itself became a trap. The Ottomans did not know whether these accounts were true, exaggerations, or hallucinations, but they knew that no one returned from Wallachia whole. The stories spread through the ranks like a fever. They said Vlad had mastered a way of breaking a man without touching him. They said he allowed prisoners to wander free inside ruined villages, only for the silence to slowly drive them insane. They said he whispered their names into the darkness so softly that after a while the prisoners began to whisper back. The most frightening rumor came from a single soldier who insisted that Vlad once told him, "I do not kill prisoners. I let their fear kill them." Whether the words were ever spoken did not matter. The terror was already real. Ottoman commanders believed a final campaign would crush him. They armed themselves with fresh troops, more disciplined units, elite janissaries. They marched with fire and drums to drown out the whispers they remembered from the last campaign. But Wallachia greeted them the same way. With silence, they found villages empty but not abandoned, bread still baking on stones, clothes still hanging to dry, footprints in the mud that seemed to stop halfway through a step. And everywhere, the same strange symbol carved onto doorframes, a vertical line with two branching marks. Some believed it was a Wallachian rune. Others believed it was a tally mark for the dead. No one knew the truth, except that the symbol made their skin crawl. The Ottomans pushed deeper. They found the ruins of a monastery inside the crumbling walls. Candles burned, though no one had lit them. Icons stared down with soot smeared across their faces, as if someone had dragged fingers across the painted eyes. The soldiers who stepped inside claimed the air felt too heavy to breathe. Some refused to enter. Others entered and refused to speak afterward. They said the walls whispered. They said they heard their own names repeated by voices that came from the stones. But when commanders tried to prove them wrong, the whispers fell silent. They marched on until they reached a valley. There they found something they should not have. Rows of Ottoman helmets placed neatly on the ground, each filled with wildflowers. They recognized the helmets. They belonged to men who had deserted during the previous invasion, but the Ottoman Empire never found their bodies, until now. The soldiers stared, horrified and confused. Why flowers? Why such careful arrangement? What message was Vlad sending? Some speculated he mocked them, others believed he honored the dead. Both interpretations were frightening, for if he mocked, he was cruel beyond measure. If he honored, he understood them too well. Night fell, and the valley grew cold. Fog rolled in slowly, swallowing the helmets, the flowers, the torches, the men. In the fog they heard footsteps, not marching, not running, just slow, deliberate steps circling the camp. The Ottomans drew swords, but the fog hid everything. Then they heard breathing, close to close. Every man pointed his blade in a different direction. Someone shouted, a horse screamed, and then, without warning, the breathing stopped. When the fog thinned at dawn, they found nothing missing. No bodies, no footprints, no marks of an attack, only one change. Every helmet was now empty, the flowers were gone. Some soldiers collapsed, others refused to continue marching. Commanders ordered discipline. But discipline means nothing when a man believes something unseen is walking beside him. When they finally forced the army to move again, they discovered fresh stakes hammered into the earth along the narrow path out of the valley. But these stakes held wooden masks instead of heads. Each mask had an expression carved into it. Some looked terrified, others looked calm. A few appeared to be screaming. The Ottomans counted them. The number matched exactly the number of soldiers in their own army. That was the moment the truth finally spread through the ranks with the force of a plague. Vlad was not trying to defeat them in battle, he was trying to unmake them. He wanted to carve fear so deep into their bones that even their grandchildren would inherit it, and perhaps he succeeded. For the Ottoman retreat began not with a battle cry, but with quiet panic. Men abandoned their cooking pots, their tents, their wounded. They fled the valley like men escaping a curse. Even after they crossed back into Ottoman territory, they looked back over their shoulders, and some swore that on the ridge above the valley, they saw him standing. A single figure, cloaked in black, motionless, watching when they told their stories in the coffee houses of Istanbul. People shivered, not because of the blood, but because of the silence, because every man described the same final image. Vlad standing on that ridge, unmoving, unblinking, patient as the grave. And because they all said the same thing, he did not chase us, he did not need to, he knew we would never return.